I have so many, but I'll go with my most recent one. I met a guy at a steak single adult fireside. We decided to meet up for dinner, and when we got there, I shook his hand. And before my hand was back by my side, he had pulled out hand sanitizer and poured it into his palm. This was 2023, not 2020. We go to the place he picked, which was an Indian restaurant in the back of a gas station with only one light plastic silverware, and you picked out your drink from the gas station fridges. During dinner, I noticed a Ziploc with some papers in it. I assumed it was old school printed directions, which is fine because we lived in a tiny place with little cell service. It was snowing, so I assumed the bag was to ensure it didn't bleed. When I asked him about it, he proceeded to tell me he printed off his resume for me to have a copy of it. He was quite offended when I said I didn't need a copy of it. Then he pulled out a note card and started reading questions he had Googled for a first date. Again, points for trying. His first question was, "What is the most important value to you?" I said faith. He said honesty. Then he says, so due to those values, he felt he needed to tell me the truth, that he didn't believe the church was true. And since I clearly was a beloved daughter of God, I needed to know he had already researched it and felt for himself it was false. However, he wanted to date someone with our church values, as then they would most likely have little to no sexual partner, which would cut down on the odds he would ever get a sexually transmitted disease. This is the point where I start to wrap up the date. Dinner was finished. I wasn't leaving early. He then tells me he hasn't asked me all the questions he looked up and starts to quickly read them off the note card. I tell him we don't have to finish them. It would be okay in the parking lot. I gave him a hug and I thanked him, at which point he once again tries to hand me his resume in case I wanted to keep a copy. Needless to say, I didn't go back for a second date. I met up with a guy I met on a dating site after talking on the phone for a week. After I drove 30 minutes to get to his town, he changed plans from dinner to a walk in the park. I was going to turn around then, but I decided I should at least meet him. When I pulled up, I saw him and another guy with head-to-toe tattoos. My date told me that was his brother that had just gotten out of prison. Fantastic. I was freaked out, but too shy to leave, so I walked with him to a picnic table where he took out his dentures and showed me he had no top teeth, which he thought was incredibly impressive. Then he attempted to kiss me 10 minutes into our date. I left and deleted the dating profile forever. He had told me prior to the date he was a widower. Once I arrived at the restaurant, he told me he was saving me a parking spot by standing in it. I asked him not to, as I think it's a jerk move, and told him I had already parked. Who wants to start a date pissing off other people who are trying to park? And yes, he said someone yelled at him while he did it, so he wanted me to make it worthwhile by changing my spot. Dear God. As soon as we were seated, he said, well, let me show you some recent vacation pics, and spent like 10 minutes explaining all his vacation pics to me. They were all him alone in the wilderness, in different spots, with the same dead-eyed stare. Then I mentioned my divorce, and he made this big production of how I must be so frustrated that he hadn't told me how his wife died. I said, no, that's fine for now. Then he says, in case you don't believe me, and shoves his phone on my face. He was showing me his wife's death certificate. In case I don't believe what? That it was suicide. Why would I doubt it? Had there been some questions about his involvement? Why did he have his wife's death certificate at the ready like that? So I changed the subject, realizing there's no way I'd go out with him again, but he seemed very intense, so I was wary of upsetting him. He held up a plastic trash bag that was stuffed with plates of food, cake, cobbler, pie. My neighbor brought me some food, so I thought I'd share it with you. At this point, I know there's no way I dare to eat whatever he brought. It doesn't seem stable. It was awkward to be at a restaurant with a massive trash bag of desserts next to me. As I'm trying to wrap up our Olive Garden date, he started planning our next date. He wanted to cook for me at his place. I said, I wouldn't be comfortable going to your house on a second date, I'm sorry. He says, unprompted. Oh, don't worry about it. If I get too excited, I know to be a gentleman and go in the bathroom and handle it myself so you can go on with our evening. The waitress quickly brought our check over, probably because he hadn't said this quietly. I made it to my car, and that was that. Yes, I think he did his wife in.